They told him he wasn't entitled to overtime. They were right about that part. IT specialists are exempt under Ontario labor law. What they forgot was that almost nobody else in the company was exempt, and their IT guy had access to every login timestamp in the entire system going back 3 years. On his last day, he ran one final report. Then he sent every non-management employee a spreadsheet with the subject line, "You're legally entitled to overtime pay." This is a story about a Canadian IT specialist, an ERP system he knew better than anyone in the company, a raise he was denied, and the single most expensive email a corporation has ever received from a departing employee. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and let me tell you about the spreadsheet that cost them everything they saved by not paying one person fairly. Let's call him Bob. Bob had been working with computers since he was a kid, the kind of person who doesn't just use technology but understands it from the inside out. He'd moved through a few jobs the way skilled IT people often do, building expertise across different systems and environments, until he landed at a service and distribution company in Ontario, Canada. The company had 2 IT employees when Bob arrived. He was one of them, and for a while, things were manageable. About 3 years before our story reaches its conclusion, the company decided to modernize. They had been running separate programs for everything. Dispatching inventory, payroll, finances, and moving information between them was clunky and error-prone. The solution was an ERP system, enterprise resource planning. One program to handle everything: purchase orders, sales, inventory, personnel, vendors, customers. If you wanted to know which salesperson had improved their numbers most over the past year, or which vendor had the fastest delivery time, or how many units of a specific part were in stock right now, all of it lived in one place. Bob recommended the specific ERP system they went with. He knew it from a previous employer. He knew it thoroughly, from the user-facing features down to the reporting infrastructure. The implementation was brutal. Bob trained employees across the company on their respective parts of the system, handled the inevitable complications of rolling out new software to an entire organization, and after several months, got things running smoothly enough to be functional. He knew that system better than anyone in the building. This detail becomes important. Then the company decided to grow. They started marketing into different time zones: Atlantic Canada to the east, Pacific Canada to the west. Atlantic time is 90 minutes ahead of Ontario. Pacific is 3 hours behind, which meant that the workday stretched considerably in both directions. Emails and orders arriving before anyone was in the office. Phone calls coming in after most people had gone home. The solution: stagger the IT shift times. Bob would start at 6 in the morning and work until 2:30. His colleague would start at 10:30 and work until 7 in the evening. His colleague had children and couldn't make the shift work. The company insisted. His colleague quit. Bob was now the only person in the IT department. The company said they would hire a replacement. They tried. They were offering well below market rate for someone with ERP expertise, and they couldn't find anyone willing to take it. In the meantime, Bob absorbed everything. Early morning calls from Atlantic Canada, late evening calls from the West Coast, training new hires on the ERP system, hardware issues, software tickets, all of it, one person, across a stretched and expanded workday. He asked for a raise, denied. He asked for overtime compensation. The company cited Ontario labor law. IT specialists are classified as exempt from overtime requirements. They were correct. Bob looked it up and confirmed it. So he kept working, and he kept asking, and he kept being denied. And he started planning. He had connections in the IT world, people he knew socially, colleagues from previous jobs. They told him what the market was offering for someone with his skills and his system knowledge. He already knew the company couldn't replace him at the salary they were willing to pay. He started looking for another job. Here is what Bob knew from 3 years of managing the ERP system. Every time a user logged in, the system logged at the time. Every time they logged out or were automatically logged out after 15 minutes of inactivity, that was logged to. 3 years of login and logout data for every employee in the company, sitting in the system's database. He also knew Ontario labor law, because he'd been researching it since the overtime conversation. And what Ontario labor law states is that salaried employees are entitled to overtime pay after 44 hours per week, unless they hold a managerial or supervisory role. Most employees at this company were not managers or supervisors. Most employees at this company had been coming in early and staying late for years, especially since the expansion into new time zones had stretched the workday for everyone. Bob ran a report. Not one report, a report for each non-management employee, pulling their login and logout data all the way back to when the ERP system was first implemented. He built the data into an Excel spreadsheet showing, week by week, how many hours each person had worked beyond the 44-hour threshold. Then he called an employment lawyer. He explained what he had. The lawyer confirmed that the data was legally relevant, that the employees had a legitimate claim, and that Bob could refer them to the firm if they wanted representation. Bob found his next job. He gave notice. He left. On his way out, he sent the email. Every non-management employee at the company received a message with an Excel attachment and a subject line that read, "You're legally entitled to overtime pay." The body of the email contained the lawyer's name and contact information. The attachment contained their data, their hours, their overtime weeks, their entitlement calculated from the ERP system that Bob had implemented, maintained, and known better than anyone in the building. Almost every employee who received that email authorized the lawyer to negotiate with the company on their behalf. The company that had refused to pay one IT specialist a fair wage for years of expanded responsibility, refused overtime for a workload that had doubled when his colleague quit, and refused to find a market-rate replacement for someone they couldn't afford to lose. That company was now facing overtime claims from nearly its entire non-management workforce, calculated precisely from the login data in the very system they'd asked Bob to implement. The legal and financial consequences were significant. The company paid all they had to do was pay Bob fairly. Instead, they paid almost everyone. What makes this story so elegant is that Bob didn't do anything wrong. He didn't hack the system. He didn't steal data. He didn't leak confidential business information. He ran a report, a standard built-in function of the ERP system, pulling data that existed precisely because the system was designed to log it. He consulted a lawyer before doing anything. He sent employees information about their own legal rights under the laws of their own province. Everything was above board. Everything was legal. Everything was, in a certain sense, just Bob doing his job one final time, running a report, organizing data, and making sure the right people had the information they needed. The company had given him access to everything. They had trusted him with the infrastructure that ran the entire organization. They had refused to compensate him fairly for 3 years. He used that access, one last time, to give everyone else what they were owed. There's a lesson here that goes beyond one IT specialist and one Canadian distribution company. The people who keep an organization running, who know the systems, who absorb the extra work, who make themselves indispensable and are rewarded for that indispensability with more demands rather than more compensation. Those people notice things, they see the data, they understand the infrastructure, they know what the company's records actually say. When you treat those people unfairly for long enough, eventually they run a report. Don't mess with the IT guy. If this gave you the deeply satisfying feeling of watching a company's own systems get used against them, smash that like button and drop a comment. What's the most satisfying they use the company's own rules against them story you've ever witnessed? I want every single one. And if you want more stories of people who knew exactly where to look and exactly what to do with what they found, subscribe. New story every week. See you in the next one.